Welcome back to part 2 of our Hateful Eight episode. In part 1, we talked with Bob Harvey from Panavision and Michael Broderson from Photochem about Ultra Panavision, the photochemical process, and what it's like working with Quentin Tarantino. If you missed it, you should definitely check it out. In this episode, we'll be talking about the immense effort that it took to resurrect 70mm projection in theaters across the country. We'll be talking with Chapin Cutler from Boston Light and Sound, as well as Dan Kofer from the Alamo Draft House. Let's jump into the Kodakery and talk with them.
With us on the podcast today is Chapin Cutler, the president of Boston Light and Sound, and the head project manager for the Hateful Eight project and bringing 70mm to theaters across the country. Chapin, thank you so much for joining us.
It's indeed my pleasure.
So we want to start off a little bit with Boston Light and Sound. One of the things that we've talked about with some of the other contributors to this podcast is that, it takes a village to bring a movie to life. It takes a lot of expertise, a lot of skills from a lot of different companies. So could you tell our audience a little bit about Boston Light and Sound, how long you've been in operation, kind of what the focus of the company is?
Well, we started, my business partner and I, Larry Shaw, started our company in 1977. And we've been in business ever since, so we're approaching our 40th year. Larry and I were both union projectionists in Boston. We were both officers in the Boston Moving Picture Machine Operators Union, and we both saw where the industry was going. In those days, xenon lamp sources, light sources in movie theaters had become kind of the norm, and the industry was moving towards multiplexes. Larry and I came from the old school days of when working as a projectionist was a craft, and what we did was we pooled our interests, the junk that we had accumulated, and basically decided to take the craft that we knew and loved so much and carry it to an extreme. And that's what we have done with our business since we started.
Have you maintained the same kind of relationship with your clients, or has it morphed throughout the years?
We have clients that we're still working with that we met in the late 70s. For example, the first we started to do dailies for film production shooting on location, and the first movie that we did was The Brinks Job with Billy Friedkin as a director. We've bumped into Billy a couple of times at the TCM Film Festival the last couple of years, and he remembers us, and of course we remember him. We did, for example, the 1981 roadshow of Napoleon, the 1927 Abo Gance classic that had its grand premiere here in the U.S. at Radio City Music Hall on January 25th, 1981. And we still handle those performances if and when they occur, right up to and including the one that was done in Oakland about 3 years ago. We have many clients that we've had for somewhere around 30 years. Universal Pictures is one, Disney is another one, and of course there are local places here in Boston where we have maintained a relationship and continue to enjoy that.
Great.
Excellent. At what stage in the Hateful Eight project were you guys brought in? Could you talk a little bit about your role in resurrecting 70mm in theaters across the country has got to have been a challenge. So when were you involved? Kind of how did it start?
Well, we became involved partially, and first off, because among other roles that I carry working for Boston Light and Sound, or as one of the owners of Boston Light and Sound, I've been the technical director for the Telluride Film Festival in Telluride, Colorado, for almost 30 years now. So when it was determined that the Hateful Eight was going to film in Telluride during the winter, I was initially contacted by Shannon McIntosh, one of the producers, to discuss providing them with a 70mm dailies room on location. We happen to have a high-quality electronic 70mm projector, which we were able to provide, and we set that up in what is referred to in Telluride terms as the Mason's Hall Cinema, and we set it up partially so that they could do dailies, but as Quentin is also an aficionado of running film, we were able to leave the regular, film festival 35 millimeter projection system in place so that they could run movies on their off days. After having several conversations with Shannon, and in making this arrangement, she decided to introduce us to the Weinstein Company, who at that point had made a commitment to do this 100-screen release of 70 millimeter, the Hateful Eight in 70 millimeter Ultra Panavision, and so I went out and met them, and they decided we were the people to handle this job. So I walked out the door with a handshake agreement in November of last year.
Oh. So how do you start a project like that? Where did you begin?
You start by going to the closest bar, and then you sort of, no. As a teetotaler, that doesn't work for me. No, I went and sat in my car and vibrated for a while and said, now why did I do that? But then, I came back and I sat down with my partner and our other project managers and said, okay, here we go. We got to put this together. And they sort of looked at me like I was crazy. And then we pulled together and tried to figure out how we were going to make this all happen. Fortunately, shortly thereafter, Interstellar had its 70 millimeter run, so we immediately sent somebody around to all of those locations to take a look and see how the 70 millimeter prints were standing up, how they were being handled, those particular facilities. Although the original intention was and remains on the part of the Weinstein Company that this be a wider release in more traditional, higher market venues than just playing it in theaters that were already set up. And once we got that information, we sort of just started figuring out how we were going to make it happen and basically hit the ground running the beginning of January.
Oh, so what was your scope of work? Was it find out how many theaters you can possibly get, or?
What we were given a preliminary list of theaters of the type and kind where they would want to play this movie. We then set about to survey somewhere around 40 of them, which we were then able to combine with the ones that we had surveyed for Interstellar, and we used those as the basis for what we needed to, or what we could calculate we needed for things like lenses for particular screen sizes and projection distances, because those all had to be ordered about 4 months out. So we had to do some kind of predictive checking, and that's what we did. So that was one of the first things we had to do. The second was, of course, that we were charged with coming up with enough equipment to equip 100 screens. And so we set about to figure out what we would need to provide to do that, which was, the projector, the lamp house, the bulbs, the platter, the number of splicers, the types and sizes of lenses, the kind of sound transport we were going to need, what we were going to need for film cleaners, what we were going to, basically we put together a whole list, and we didn't limit ourselves to 100 theaters because we have to be prepared for failures or, mechanical things that happen, because, it's like your car, you're driving down the highway and all of a sudden it decides it's not going to run. You don't know why, but
Right.
You know that it's an electromechanical device and it will break down. There is nothing you can do to keep it from breaking down because
Right.
it's an imperfect device.
Well, and just, if not to interrupt, but just so our audience understands, nobody's producing new projectors at this point, right? You can't go and just buy one if you need one. Like, there's no manufacturer out there producing new parts and pieces and projectors, correct?
That is correct. The 70 millimeter projectors basically went out of production somewhere around the turn of the century. So all the projectors and all the lamp houses and all the platters and all the bits and parts and pieces, with a few exceptions, we had to find in the used market. Most of what had been out there had been destroyed, because when we went through the digital conversion, part of the responsibility of the theater owner was to basically trash the projectors. So they all ended up in landfills. So not only did we have to find those machines that we needed, we also had to produce an extra 20 in case we needed them in case of failures, as I spoke of earlier, that even brand new projectors fail. And our scope became one of finding 100 complete systems and putting them together and make them ready to ship out in time for the release. And that was our scope of work.
Wow. And you did it, right? I mean,
we have done it.
Excellent.
Congratulations.
Yep,
Congratulations.
We have done it. We have, as of this particular moment, on December the 16th, in the year of our Lord 2015, we have shipped out every system that needs to go into the field. All but about 3 of them have been delivered to the theater. As of Saturday the 19th, all but 9 will have been installed and tested and ready to go. And those 9, because of the configuration of the theaters, are not going in until the 22nd of December, but they will be ready to run a show starting, Christmas Day.
Wow.
Awesome.
I understand that you offered some amount of training to the theaters that you installed these in. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, we are offering training. We're also providing, technical supervision for opening weekend, and sending people in to make sure that the prints get loaded onto the device that feeds the film into the projector and make sure everything is working properly. One of our tasks has been that in the past, movies were shipped in on reels, and each reel would hold somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes worth of film. In order to simplify this in terms of getting the prints in the field, we set up a facility in Valencia, California, in which the prints, as they come out of the laboratory at Photochem, they're shipped off to our facility, and where we have 12 platters set up and 6 editors or re-editors, if you want to call them that are assembling all of the prints. We've developed some oversized reels and cases that allow us to take an entire print, put it on one reel, ship it out to the theater, so that's the way it's received, and that reduces the need to have people who know how to put reels of film together for platter. It also means that we can ultrasonically splice, do all the splices, so in essence we're sending out one 22,000-foot reel of film that has no splices in it. Wow. For all intents and purposes.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier that you started out as a projectionist and it was a craft. Yep. Could you talk a little bit about, because I'm assuming at this point with digital projection having taken the role it has, a lot of that knowledge that was there for projectionists has been lost. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like when you started in the craft of projection?
Well, in those days, we basically had one projectionist per theater. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, they were licensed by the Department of Public Safety, and the projectionist was the only licensed person within a theater, so to a very large extent, the projectionist had the responsibility for the safety of people that are in 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 seat theaters. Everything was manual, which meant that a normal feature, which would be 6 reels long, was run by an operator who threaded the projector every 20 minutes and made a reel change so that people saw a continuous performance. They were responsible for the maintenance and the upkeep of the equipment and for running the shows on a high quality and professional basis. We protected the print and as certainly as best we could. And at least in the case of the theaters I worked in, sometimes we would get 6 months out of a print, and it was just as new going out the door as when it came in. One of the reasons people talked about the digital conversion was that the prints got scratched and dirty and all of that stuff, and that's because of the way the prints were handled, and both mechanically as well as in projection booths where you had one person trying to run 12 theaters at the same time. There was no print protection going on. But it really was a craft. The equipment that we had was either installed or built in the 30s and 40s, or designed in the 30s and 40s, even if it was brand new in the 60s. So there was a lot to do in order to keep a movie theater running. With digital, you don't really even need to have anybody in the projection booth. And, I would say, digital projectors have faults of their own, which we can talk about another time if you want to.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
It was a very different time.
I'm sure. We've talked to a lot of people about this Hateful Eight, and we've talked about the projection and the projector and the screen, but not as much about the audio component. Can you tell me a little bit about the complexities that you faced with getting the sound from this film into the theaters?
Well, every theater we're going into has a sound system, and the sound systems are configured to an industry standard, which is nominally defined as either a 5.1 audio or a 7.1 audio system. And the Hateful Eight is a 5.1 audio playback. And in the case of what we call stereo in movie theaters, instead of the way it is at home, there are 3 sets of loudspeakers behind the screen, which are left, center, and right, and that accounts for numbers 1, 2, and 3. 4 and 5 are the surround speakers, one on the left side, one on the right side. So that accounts for 5 of the channels. And then the point 1 refers to a subwoofer, which is used for bass enhancement for, gunshots and hooves of horses and, explosions and things like that. The track in the good old days used to be a magnetic track, which has gone into disuse because of environmental issues in particular. And so this particular soundtrack is being played back in the DTS process, which is a system that was developed for the release of Jurassic Park 2 back in the 80s. And what it basically is that it's a hard drive that you ingest the audio track into digitally, and there is a time code which is recorded and printed onto each film print. So the hard drive follows in step, frame by frame, inch by inch. The audio follows the picture and is then played back into a cinema processor, which then distributes the 5.1 audio to each of the appropriate speakers.
Yeah.
Now, part of our problem was, once again, when film stopped being used as a regular distribution format, so did the manufacturer of DTS processors. We found we were able to go back to the original manufacturer who made about 30 new ones for us, but we had to track down another 90 or 100, which we brought in here, took apart, had them rebuilt, put in new drives, replace components as needed, basically put them back together again, and as basically remanufactured units, and that's what we're putting out in the field.
Wow. Sounds like a lot of work.
Well, it is, but the other part of it is that in order for us to do this project, my partner Larry, who I mentioned earlier, basically had to take on the role of, designer and integrator of putting this system together. And as a part of that, we had to go into the manufacturing business, which we've never been in, and design and manufacture about 125 different parts. of which we needed anywhere from 2 to 5,000. And so not only were we hunting around the country to find hulks of broken down and destroyed old 70-millimeter projectors, but in order to remanufacture them, which meant for us stripping them down to the mainframe, replacing gears, replacing bearings, replacing broken parts, replacing things that were missing, we basically had to manufacture whatever we couldn't find in the field. And that's
amazing.
Was also a big part of what we had to do. We now have a pretty good stockpile of parts to repair the 3 different kinds of projectors that we've put together for this release.
Wow.
Oh.
So let's talk about the final product. Have you seen the film?
Yes.
And you saw it projected in 70 millimeter?
Of course.
And
I've actually seen it both ways.
And what do you think?
I would tell you that I went into this wondering why in the world somebody would make a movie that takes place almost completely in a single room. And after I got through seeing this movie, I wondered how it would be possible to make it any other way.
Fantastic.
This movie, I mean, part of it is that the warmth that you get from the 70-millimeter image and the fact that the details that you would never see in a digital image, the use that Quentin makes of this expanded frame. I mean, there's one scene that in particular in which Samuel L. Jackson is kind of in the middle foreground of the image, and one character speaks to him about something, and he's up in the upper left-hand corner. It's like he couldn't get any further out of the frame as possible, but his size and his distance gives a depth of proportion that you couldn't get with any other format. And I'll tell you that this picture is probably the most stunning piece of film I've ever seen in my 50-year career.
Wow. That is high praise.
There's a statement.
It is.
Yeah.
But, you know, we played some tricks in order to do our part of it. For example, the lenses that we've had to use have all been overhauled by the manufacturer. We've had the lenses stopped down, which means that they have a greater depth of focus than most normal projection lenses do, which means that the anomalies you often get in film projection having to do with what happens to the film when the heat gets to it has much less effect. The fact that we're going into theaters that are 75% silver screens, we're able to use up some light by making the picture sharper. And so, to a very large extent, there has never been a movie that has been projected with the kind of care and quality that's gone into the equipment. Since we had to overhaul it, we basically removed the projectors when they were originally manufactured were convertible between 35 millimeter and 70 millimeter. We stripped out all the 35 millimeter parts and optimized the projectors for 70 millimeter. When they were originally built, they were more optimized for 35 millimeter and compromises made to run 70. These are 70 millimeter projectors, and they show 70 millimeter film the way it should be shown.
That's fantastic. It sounds like, to all of our audience out there, and we've said this now, I think at the end of every segment, is if you can get to it in 70 millimeter, go see it in 70 millimeter. The lists are out there now on the web. You can find the official list of theaters. It sounds like it's the only way to see it.
I would tell you it's the only way to see it, which is not to say necessarily that the DCP is bad, but I will tell you it doesn't look like this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So get out there, see the Hateful Eight. If you can see it in 70, see it there, and if not, I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic movie, no matter how you can get to it.
Absolutely.
Chapin, thank you so much for joining us today.
It is my pleasure, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah.
You bet.
100%. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Take care.
Bye.
One of the great things about Hateful Eight is that it's being projected on film in 70 millimeter, which is not something that happens often these days. So here to talk with us about the excitement and the challenges of projecting in 70 millimeter is Dan from the Alamo Draft House. So let's jump into the Kodakery and talk with Dan.
So joining us for this segment is Dan Kofer from the Alamo Draft House. Hello, Dan.
Hello. Good to be here.
Thanks for coming on the show. Dan is here to talk about projection. We've covered everything from origination through the photochemical process, and kind of the last step in bringing a movie like The Hateful Eight to life is actually projecting it in a theater. And projecting on film isn't something that happens everywhere anymore. So we wanted to bring in some specialists. So we have Dan with us. And so Dan, could you tell our audience a little bit about your role at the Alamo Draft House?
Well, I'm head projectionist for all of our theaters in the Austin market, which is our largest market in the U.S. We have 5 theaters there, and so I oversee all projection and AV-related affairs for the Austin market.
Nice. So for the Alamo Draft House, could you actually tell our audience a little bit about what it is and what makes the theater so special? Like out here in Rochester, we don't have an Alamo Draft House. I would love one to come here if you could work that out somehow.
I'll put in a word for you.
Thank you. Thanks. But could you tell our audience a little bit about the Alamo Draft House and what makes it?
We like to refer to ourselves as the movie theater for movie lovers. We are committed to providing the best on-screen presentation as well as creative programming. And not to mention a full kitchen and bar, so you can dine in and enjoy drinks in the theater during the movie.
That doesn't sound so bad.
Yeah, Megan was actually just fist pumping over here about when you said the word bar. So that sounds lovely. And you guys also are renowned for really creative programming, correct?
Yeah, we try to do more than just run your average blockbusters. So we'll do specialty screenings and sing-alongs and quote-alongs and a lot of classic cinemas. And we definitely have a focus on maintaining the dying film formats. So we run 35 millimeter at a lot of our locations on a regular basis. We even run VHS for occasions when that content isn't available on any other format.
Projecting on film, like I kind of teed that up a little bit in the beginning but that isn't something that a lot of theater chains do anymore. Most theaters project digitally. What is it about projecting on film? You guys have really worked hard to continue to do so. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, part of it is simply being able to show films that aren't available in the DCP format or even in Blu-rays. We maintain a film archive called the American Genre Film Archive, or AGFA for short, where we have probably 5,000 films in our archive in Austin, and many of those, they may be the only prints of those movies that exist in the entire world, and the only way to watch them is to use essentially the prints that we have. And so we're able to put things on screen in that format that we simply cannot do and nobody else can do in another format.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And also just film is cool.
Right.
Even watching an old beat-up pink scratched print of some movie that you've never seen before has a very just sort of, I don't know, it's an enlightening experience.
And considering that it's not done everywhere, are you seeing more of a popularity, or are people wanting that, asking for that?
I think it's a growing demand. We've been installing 35 millimeter at many of the locations that we've been opening around the country, and trying to help build a sort of groundswell of support for 35 millimeter. And we've been getting very good reaction with it. There are people who will come to see movies simply because of the format. Even if they've seen that movie 100 times before, the opportunity to see it on film, 35 millimeter or 70 millimeter, is a big deal to a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So that kind of leads us to The Hateful Eight, which has been a huge project in a way, resurrecting technology that hasn't been used in a number of years, starting with Ultra Panavision, and now with the idea of a roadshow, which hasn't been done with a big Hollywood movie in quite a while. Could you talk a little bit about, you guys are going to be one of the roadshow theaters, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And could you talk a little bit about the challenges of what needs to be done to, for an average theater owner, for yourselves, to bring 70 millimeter in and project?
Well, we already have a little bit of advantage in already having 70 millimeter installed. We brought it in, 2 or 3 years ago, shortly before the Master came out on 70 millimeter, and we wanted to present that properly. And it also gave us the opportunity to start doing series of big screen classics, or not quite so classic 70 millimeter films. So we're prepared for it, but in order to run the Ultra Panavision, because it's anamorphic, we need to have anamorphic adapters, and because the aspect ratio is wider than your normal scope aspect ratio, we need to bring in different lenses. And another advantage we have is that we've already done this once before. Not too long ago, we ran It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, which is in the same format. And in fact, in that case, we didn't know the format of the print we were getting. We thought it was just a standard 70 millimeter until we got it out of the cans and looked at it and realized it was anamorphic. So we went to our friends at Boston Light and Sound to get the lenses we needed to run that properly, and it looked amazing. It was quite fantastic. So we're already fairly well prepared, but I understand most of the locations running 70 millimeter for this engagement are having the projectors installed specifically for it.
Right. I know some of the hope and the idea of having all these new places who, unlike you guys, didn't have the equipment. But a lot of the equipment, it's not like there's anybody making new 70 millimeter projectors, correct?
Not as far as I know. So 70 millimeter projectors are kind of at a premium right now.
Yeah, I imagine
they're
so.
A hot item.
The eBay business is very strong on those. So could you tell our audience a little bit, because we're going to have a pretty broad audience for the Kodakery. So could you explain to our audience a little bit what anamorphic lenses mean?
Oh, well, in order to get the widescreen effect, the image on the film itself is squeezed horizontally, and the anamorphic lens unsqueezes it to project it as a super widescreen image.
Nice.
And that requires a special anamorphic lens to do.
And what about the projectionists? I would imagine there's not a ton of people that know how to do this remaining. Is that true, or people being trained?
I'm sure are a lot of guys out there who know how to do this, but they may not be active in the job anymore. After the digital revolution, a lot of great projectionists were unfortunately thrown out of work or forced into other lines of work, and so it may be difficult to find trained professionals who know how to do this and can get their skills back up in time. The fact that these installations are going back in, it only makes it easier to do more shows like this in the future.
Yeah.
And to get some of the old projectionists back, that kind of makes me happy.
Yeah.
Nice. So for you guys, which theater is going to be in the roadshow, and when can folks come and take part?
Well, it's going to be the Alamo Draft House Ritz in Austin. That's our 70 millimeter house, and film opens on Christmas Day.
Nice. And how long will it run in 70 millimeter?
We are, I believe, committed to run strictly 70 millimeter until the digital opening in January.
Excellent. That's going to be a really exciting opportunity. And anybody out there, especially if you've gone through kind of all of the parts of this, go see it on 70 millimeter if you can. I mean, it's going to be an experience, and if you're in Austin, it sounds like you have a great outlet to go check it out.
Yeah, come on down. And to be quite honest, 70 millimeter makes everything look better. And if this could be the greatest movie in the world, but if you're not seeing it on 70, you're not seeing it the best way you can.
Yeah.
Yep. Amen. So thank you so much for joining us, Dan. We appreciate talking about the Alamo Draft House and all of your commitment to film and projecting on film. And we look forward to talking to you guys again in the future.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you
so much.
Okay, see you in Austin someday.
You
That's
bet.
right.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
It is a great satisfaction to be able to speak to you through the medium of this wonderful invention.